What if the voice that tells you you're not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy enough, isn't actually your voice at all, but an imposter that has been whispering lies so consistently you've mistaken it for truth? How many dreams have died not from lack of ability, but from the persistent chorus of internal critics that convince us to surrender before we even begin? Is there a way to silence these doubts forever? Or must we learn to dance with them until we discover they have no real power except what we choose to give them? Hello everyone. Welcome to Universal Life Stories. Today's story reveals the ancient secret to conquering the doubts that keep us small and afraid. You might be listening to a voice right now that tells you your dreams are impossible, that you don't have what it takes to succeed. This profound tale could be the key that unlocks your courage and shows you how to transform doubt from enemy to ally. While listening to this story, we will discover timeless wisdom about the nature of fear and the power we possess to choose which voice deserves our attention. So stay with us till the end. In a coastal town where morning fog rolled in like daily meditation, lived a young woman named Isabella. She was 28, talented, and possessed a voice that could make strangers stop on the street to listen when she sang. But despite her obvious gifts, Isabella had spent years working as a receptionist at a dental office, watching her musical dreams gather dust like the piano in her childhood home that no one played anymore. The voice of doubt had become Isabella's constant companion, narrating her life with such consistency that she had begun to believe its assessments were factual observations rather than fearful projections. When she considered auditioning for local bands, the voice would remind her that hundreds of more experienced musicians were competing for the same opportunities. When she thought about recording demos, it would calculate the costs and convince her that investing in her music was financial irresponsibility disguised as artistic pursuit. Most insidiously, the voice had learned to sound reasonable, even protective. It would whisper that staying safe in her predictable job was mature wisdom, that pursuing music at her age was embarrassing self-delusion, that people who knew her would judge her for thinking she was special enough to make it in such a competitive field. The voice had become so skillful at presenting logical arguments for limitation that Isabella rarely questioned its authority, or considered that it might not be speaking truth. The morning everything changed began with Isabella arriving at work to find her employer had sold the dental practice to a corporate chain that was immediately laying off half the staff, including her. As she sat in her car in the parking lot, holding the termination letter that ended her financial security, Isabella felt something crack open inside her chest. Not her heart breaking, but a shell that had been constraining her heart for so long. She had forgotten what expansion felt like. For the first time in years, the practical voice of limitation was temporarily silenced by the shock of unexpected change. And in that silence, Isabella heard something she had almost forgotten existed: her own authentic desires, speaking without apology or qualification. She wanted to sing, not someday, not when conditions were perfect, not when she felt more confident or prepared, but now, with all her imperfections and uncertainties intact. Instead of immediately searching for another safe job, Isabella made a decision that terrified and excited her in equal measure. She drove to a local coffee shop, known for hosting open mic nights, and asked the owner, Marcus, about performing. Marcus, a former musician who had opened the coffee shop after his own dreams had been postponed into permanent suspension, looked at Isabella with eyes that recognized something familiar: the hunger of talent that was tired of hiding. Marcus explained that their next open mic night was in 3 days, and performers typically prepared 2 to 3 songs for a 15-minute set. As Isabella walked back to her car, the voice of doubt immediately resumed its familiar commentary, pointing out that she hadn't performed in public in over 5 years, that her voice was probably rusty from disuse, that she would embarrass herself in front of strangers who would judge her harshly for her obvious nervousness and lack of professional polish. But something had shifted in Isabella's relationship to that voice. Instead of accepting its authority without question, she began experimenting with a practice her grandmother had once taught her: the art of witnessing thoughts without immediately believing them. Isabella's grandmother, who had emigrated from Italy with nothing but courage and a sewing machine, had shared a wisdom that seemed almost Buddhist in its simplicity. Isabella, cara mia, you have many voices in your head, but only one is really you. Learn to know the difference. That evening, Isabella sat at her kitchen table with a notebook and began writing down every doubt that arose when she thought about performing. The voice told her she would forget the words, sing off key, choose inappropriate songs, dress wrong, move awkwardly, and generally prove to everyone present that she lacked the talent necessary for musical success. As she wrote each doubt, Isabella began noticing something fascinating. They all followed the same pattern of predicting catastrophic failure, without offering any constructive guidance for improvement. She realized that the voice of doubt was not actually trying to help her succeed, but was trying to prevent her from trying at all. True wisdom, she understood, would acknowledge potential challenges while offering practical strategies for addressing them. Doubt was simply fear wearing the mask of prudence, attempting to keep her safe from the possibility of rejection or failure by convincing her to reject herself first. Over the next 3 days, Isabella developed what she privately called her doubt dialogue practice. Instead of trying to suppress or ignore the fearful voice, she would acknowledge it politely and then consciously choose to listen to what she began recognizing as her deeper wisdom. When doubt said, "You'll forget the words," wisdom responded by suggesting she practice more and bring lyric sheets as backup. When doubt predicted, "You'll be terrible," wisdom reminded her that everyone starts somewhere, and growth requires beginning from whatever level you currently possess. The transformation was remarkable. By engaging with her doubts practically rather than emotionally, Isabella discovered that most of them dissolved when met with concrete action. She spent hours practicing songs she loved, recorded herself to identify areas for improvement, and even rehearsed her stage presence in front of her bathroom mirror until movement felt natural rather than forced. On the night of the open mic, Isabella arrived early to watch other performers and observe something that shifted her perspective permanently. The audience wasn't a panel of harsh critics waiting to crush amateur dreams, but a collection of people who genuinely appreciated live music and were supportive of anyone brave enough to share their gifts. She noticed that technical perfection wasn't what made performances memorable. It was the authenticity and emotional connection that singers brought to their songs. When Isabella finally took the stage, something magical happened. The voice of doubt, which had been chattering anxiously all day, became completely silent the moment she began singing. In its place arose a profound sense of presence and connection that felt like coming home to herself after years of living in exile. Her voice, which she had feared would be rusty and weak, poured forth with a richness and power that surprised even her. The response from the audience was immediate and genuine. People stopped their conversations to listen, and by the end of her second song, Isabella could see tears in several faces throughout the room. When she finished her set, the applause was enthusiastic and sustained. But more importantly, Isabella felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with external validation and everything to do with having honored the authentic expression that had been waiting patiently inside her. Marcus approached her after the performance with news that would validate her courage in the most practical way possible. A local event coordinator who had been in the audience wanted to hire Isabella for a wedding the following month, and 2 other coffee shops had asked if she would be interested in regular weekly performances. Within 2 weeks of that first open mic night, Isabella had enough musical income to make performing her primary focus rather than a side hobby. But the most profound transformation wasn't in her external circumstances, but in her relationship to the voice of doubt itself. Isabella had learned that doubt wasn't an enemy to be defeated, but a nervous passenger that could be acknowledged without being allowed to drive. She discovered that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act in alignment with your deepest truth, despite fear's objections. The key insight that changed everything was recognizing that we always have a choice about which internal voice receives our attention and obedience. The voice of doubt will probably never disappear completely, but it doesn't need to disappear. It simply needs to be put in its proper place as one voice among many, rather than the authoritative narrator of our possibilities. 6 months later, Isabella was performing regularly throughout the region and had begun recording the album she had dreamed about for years. The voice of doubt still occasionally offered its commentary, but Isabella had learned to respond with gentle firmness. "Thank you for your concern, but I'm choosing to listen to wisdom today." She had discovered that silencing doubts isn't about making them disappear, but about remembering that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that chooses which thoughts deserve your belief and action. Isabella's transformation taught her what spiritual teachers throughout history have tried to communicate: that we become what we focus on, we strengthen what we feed with attention, and we always have the power to choose courage over comfort, growth over safety, authentic expression over fearful hiding. The voice of doubt hadn't been silenced by force, but had been rendered powerless by the simple recognition that it was just one opinion among many, and not a particularly helpful one. If this story resonates in your heart, give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. What dreams have you postponed because of doubt's persistent whispers? Which voice will you choose to follow starting today? Your courage to share might inspire someone else to pick up their own buried dreams and give them the chance they deserve. Subscribe to Universal Life Stories for more transformative tales that awaken the courage within. Until next time, remember that you are not your doubts. You are the magnificent soul who gets to choose which voice speaks for your future.